Hi, this is Joe Scacciaferro, and this is On Location. All right, today one of my guests are somebody I met in a control room, which is where we meet all our friends, either backstage, control rooms, on the stage, wherever I happen to be. There's always somebody new to meet and somebody interesting. Today I have with me David Burke. Dave, welcome. Uh,
Hi, thanks for having me.
no problem. Thanks for coming. Dave's a graphics guy, and when I say that in a broad sense. It's kind of an umbrella. Graphics have a lot of other opportunities tied to them, and that's what we're going to kind of go through right now with Dave. Is what exactly is a graphics person in today's world, and what exactly do you do in that world?
Okay. Um, well, First and foremost, I'm a graphics operator. I've been doing that for about 25 years. And I do a lot of sports, entertainment. The jobs are a little different between sports and news and entertainment. But, in sports, for example, we come in about 6 hours before a game starts. And we're handed a graphics package, which is basically all of the templates and blank pages that we're going to pop in everybody's names and headshots and stats and things into. So, there isn't enough time before a game to build all that from scratch. So we're given basically here's your platform for the day, and we prepare everything we think we're going to need during the game, and then during the game we play things as needed, and it's generally in sports a two-man job. Yeah, I'm an operator. My responsibility is to run the equipment and to respond to the director when he says bring something on the screen or fly it off. I usually work with the graphics producer, and he's responsible for the content, and he talks to the producers and basically tells me what to type, and I type it, and that's essentially the relationship.
And we're talking about graphics I mean, because again, our audience is broad. It's not just broadcast people, it's every walk of entertainment. Um, so we're talking about if you're watching a game or if you're watching news, if you're watching something, there are things that pop up on the screen. There's either full page with a bunch of graphics, or there's a lower third that comes in, or so forth and so on. It's all of those things that you're talking about that you're building, and then the director's putting it up on the screen.
Correct. And there are a bunch of different graphics responsibilities, certainly in sports. You take a football game, for example, you have the score bug that's in the whole time and shows the score and the timeouts. That's somebody else's job. That's the guy sitting next to me. They do the 1st and 10 line, and that might be two more people working on the other end of the truck or even back in New York. We do, you have other graphics going. You have the ticker on the bottom of the screen that's coming from master control. But what I deal with is what's called the insert look, the insert package. And that's basically everything else, everything other than those things.
And the machine you're talking about, who and what are those machines? You said typing. I know it's not just typing.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's funny. I mean, the job has changed so much through the years. Traditionally, it was always a Chiron. That's kind of the biggest company that makes graphics machines for television, or they were. Through the years, other machines have come about. We usually use either a Chiron or something called a Viz or an Expression. Expression is made by Ross. A Viz is made by, maybe they're made by Viz. I don't know. And then there are other smaller platforms, but those are the main ones that are being used these days, certainly in sports.
Okay, I got a bunch of questions now that you set us up perfectly. And you also mentioned you design. You design some of those graphics. Those aren't built on
Right.
those machines, correct?
Correct. Well, yes and no. All right, so let me back up a step. So like I said, when we come in to do a game, we're handed a graphics package. Well, I also build those graphics packages. So I'll work with a designer or an art director or an art department, and they'll give me examples and they'll give me reference images and elements and things. And I'll basically take the building blocks that they'll hand me. And depending on the job, sometimes they'll give me very specific things, And sometimes they'll give me a sketch and say, have at it, and I'll do a lot more of that myself. But either way, I assemble all of these elements into the graphics package that's going to have all the templates that we think you're going to need when you get to the truck. So all the different varieties of lower thirds with 2 rows or with 3 columns or 5 columns or whatever. And the same thing with full screens, with a headshot, with 2 headshots, with different combinations of rows and columns. And I'll come up with all the different formats of templates that we're going to need, and also ways to populate those things, because again, there would be too much. When I started doing this job 25 years ago, we used to type for a living, and we'd come in and we'd be handed, here's the standings, and it would be a newspaper clipping, and God, I sound old, and everything would be pieces of paper, and our job would just be to type everything as fast as we can. And there were a lot fewer graphics back then, because there's only so much that 1 or 2 people are capable of typing in a short amount of time. We could pre-record things like we would call them row pops, where you would have a lower third and you would pop in just the guy's name and his number and his position, and then you would type everything else yourself. But through the years, now that we've become so much more computer oriented, there's a lot more. You fill out a spreadsheet before you get there, and then I'll call up a graphic, and instead of typing all the information, I'll pop in his name, and I'll pop in his headshot, and I'll pop in stats from some data feed that comes in over the internet. So everything's a lot more automated than they used to be. And so you get a lot more graphics during a game than you used to. Used to be, occasionally between plays, we might show something. And now basically after every play, we show a couple of things. It's just the volume of graphics that we all expect to see in our games. Our tastes have changed through the years, and everything's much more graphic oriented than they used to be. And so we have all kinds of computer systems that help us generate all those graphics in the volumes that we need. And so part of building a disk is setting up all of the ways to populate all those graphics off of spreadsheets, off of feeds that come from different stats companies and things like that.
That's awesome. That is awesome. You know what? I always wanted to ask this question. I've never worked in like an MSNBC or a big news where they just slam everything up on the screen. There's weather, there's a ticker, there's time, there's news, breaking news. I mean, it just looks like just a hodgepodge of changing things. How many graphics people are working on that?
You know what's funny? 0. There are no graphics people working on that during the broadcast. And that you talk about how the business has changed in news. There's almost never a graphics operator in news anymore. You have all these different systems. This one generates these stock prices, and this one does the weather on the bottom, and this one does all the different lower thirds or the over the shoulders, and they all run through what we call an automated news system. And there's no operator. So a producer has something that kind of looks like the graphics program, and he calls up, and when he writes his story, if he wants a lower third, he types star CG2 line and then types what that lower third is. Or if it's an over the shoulder, he goes to some master pool of images and drags in the one he wants, and the producers actually build the graphics. And then they get sent through a computer system and they get played out. And a lot of times it's just an automated playlist, and the TD hits next. So I have one friend who used to do a local news thing. He said he had 8 vises, no operators, and basically just he was controlling 8 different channels of graphics all at the same time, no people behind them. And that's
I know why I don't produce news. I am not going to do all those jobs.
It's funny because there are certain things in a news, when you talk about cable news and everything, I find that some of the best technical directors that I know that I've met through the years all came out of those news programs. Because when you can go from a 12 box to a totally different 8 box, and you're the one person setting all that stuff up, they do so many things all at the same time with your 5 different channels of graphics and all your different. And that's a hell of a skill. And those guys all, once they get that down, they can pretty much go anywhere, it seems. And it seems to be an easier job.
That's fascinating. I've been in this 30 years, and I had no idea that's how that worked.
Yeah. TD is a really, really demanding job in cable news. And the more you take people out of the equation, the more the remaining people are going to have more to do.
Yeah.
And that's what seems to happen in cable news.
Yeah, no, I mean, I worked for a couple of networks real fast where real fast I was in and I was out just because of that.
Yeah.
because when I got there, there's no people there, and
Hmm.
everything was automated, and I had that list that you were talking about, and it was like, okay, well, you have to switch, and you have to do this, and you have to do that, and you have to call the shots. Meanwhile, I had talent out on the field, and I'm trying to talk to them, and I was like, this is not worth the minuscule amount of money I get. You want to pay me for 6 positions, I'll do it. But you're not going to pay me for one position. Anyway, we're way off topic, and I apologize for that.
We managed to pull it off every time, and so they keep doing it.
The key to our industry is
Yeah,
don't be a savior, because then you own it.
that's right. It's funny. I follow this advice I give this advice in TV, and also when people get married for the first time, I give them the same advice. If you screw something up badly enough the first time, you'll never be asked to do it again.
That's interesting. That was an advice my father had given me very early on. My family are all contractors, and
Okay.
one of the things he said, when you get out there, he's also a Navy man his entire career. One of the things he said is, don't volunteer,
Yeah,
because once you volunteer, you own it.
that's
And he
it.
said,
Yeah,
you don't tell people you can do things, because once
yeah,
you do, you own it.
yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't really apply that to my career.
Let
So
me let me bring that back to what we're talking about then, because we're talking about graphics positions, right? I've known several graphics producers, and the problem is it's a difficult job, and not everybody can do it well. And in theory, it's a stepping stone. You're a graphics producer before you then start, on your way up to producing the main show. And what I've seen happen so many times is that people who are actually good at graphics producing get stuck there, and they're never given the opportunity to do anything else, because nobody wants them to stop doing the graphics producing because they've proven they can do it. And you get pigeonholed because you're actually good at something. And the best thing that they could do for their career would be to screw it up enough that they're told to go do something else.
let's make sure we're not putting advice out there for the people coming into the industry to make sure you're garbage, because
Yeah,
then you can get to do what you want. These are
it's not
veterans.
actually very good advice.
Although you've been very successful, I've been successful. You learn the art of doing that to a degree.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your career. Let's talk about the evolution. So
Okay.
let's go to the beginning. When was your first entree, and how did you get in?
I am one of the few people I know who actually graduated in 4 years with what they had chosen to do before they ever got to college, and continued doing that job for the rest of their lives. Who actually does that? So
Nobody.
when I was in high school, I went to Freehold Township High School, and it's part of a district that each school has their own specialized learning center. So at Howell High School, which is the next town over, they have the Fine and Performing Arts Center, and they have theater and dance and video classes. So as a junior in high school, I started taking TV and video classes using, Betacam and Amiga for the graphics, and really we're talking the early 90s. But I knew then, this is why would I want to do anything else for a living, And then I went off to Montclair State, and they still do have a wonderful television department. And because they're located only 12 miles outside the Lincoln Tunnel, there are plenty of opportunities to start working while you're still in school. Interned on the Montel Williams show.
Nice.
I started when I was still in school. I got my the job that led to my career was doing the scoreboards at the Meadowlands. Back in when was it still the Brendan Byrne Arena? I think it became the Continental Airlines Arena while I was there. But basically working on the Jumbotron and we had what we called starburst boards, like Daktronics scoreboards that kind of look like Light Bright. And I learned how to do basic keyframe animation from drawing stick figures on this Light Bright board and having them move their arms and legs around and go defense. And you start drawing pictures of fences and defense, and it all just expands from there. It was a fun job for a kid who was still in college. I mean, it was great, And
Excuse me. Could I then interrupt? How did you get that job?
Right. Part of going to Montclair is because they're located. So they're so well located in that North Jersey, New York media area. They're well connected, and I guess somebody called somebody and said, "I got a job. Send me some people." And I guess I had made enough friends within the TV department at my school, and I was given that opportunity. It was great.
So you're saying even at that level, you recognize that a network and a community of people was going to be critical for you to move your career forward.
Well, I don't know if I knew it at the time, but it was better than delivering pizzas, which was what I was doing before that. So, somebody said, "Hey, you want to run a scoreboard?" I said, "Yeah, sure." I would say that, yeah, early on, I realized, hey, I'm surrounded by people who do this kind of thing for a living, and these seem like the people I should hang with. There was a guy who was a cameraman who had taken a Chiron class on the Infinite at the time was the machine, and he said, Dave, you should give this a shot. This seems like something you'd be good at. And I followed him basically and decided to take the class. And from there, I went up to ESPN and got my first real job as a graphics operator, working on Sports Center. And I did that for a year. And for me, that was like graduate school. It didn't pay very well. The hours were lousy, but in 1 year's time, I became a pretty good Infinite operator, and I came back to New York and started making a living for real, So that was kind of how I.
Well, two questions. Mm-hmm. Two quick questions. One, back then, ESPN was in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
Everybody I know who went to ESPN, myself included, because I did X Games.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, this is too far. This isn't either you live there or you don't work there. It's a tough place.
I lived there, and my apartment was $425 a month, and it smelled like cat pee and curry, and it was fine. It was fine because I was 24 years old or whatever, and it was just perfect for that time of my life. But I counted the days until the lease ran out of my apartment, and I got the hell out of there as soon as my year was up, because look, I was one of the better paid people in the job at the time. I think I was making $27,000, and that was the high end. But as a career starter, it couldn't have been better. Just to be able to get to log that many hours just every day, just typing and just learning how to become a graphics operator. I wouldn't have traded it for anything. But as soon as it came to me, it got tripled that. So
Yeah. And so did your rent.
Right, exactly. Everything's relative, I guess. But no, it was a great place to start. And I still, I met a lot of people up there, and I still run into them every once in a while. Some of the folks that I worked with up there, and for that matter, I still work with some folks that I used to work with at the Meadowlands doing the Jumbotron. Joe Cephalo, he's our Jets in-game director. He and I were doing that scoreboard job together. Another guy that was my roommate at the time, he was the head of scoreboard operations at the Garden for a number of years. It's funny. Everywhere you go, you meet people and you keep running into them.
Yeah.
You're like,
what's interesting about our world? And if you're outside of it, everybody thinks it's huge.
Right.
And it's so big and it's so vast. It's not.
Yeah. It's true.
So
if you piss off the wrong people, you find out just how small this business is.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and the size sometimes helps you because you get to meet and know a lot of people. If you do the right job, do the wrong job, you could be excluded from this industry pretty quickly.
It's true. It's funny because people often ask me, how do you find work? And I don't know. They just call me. It's a small enough business. I've been around for long enough. Anybody who hires what I do for a living, they all know me. So, and I think that most of us, crewers like having dependable people that they can call every time. And, they don't want to go out and try to find new people. They want to keep calling back the people that have worked for them in the past. And so it's so important to have return clients. And basically, we accumulate our, I'm talking as a freelancer, and I guess that's part of what we should touch on is that I've been freelancing since 2000, basically. And it's the way that when it comes to networking and getting to know people throughout the business as a freelancer, it's the only way to do it.
And, a lot of times, now it's pretty much standard. Everybody understands what freelancers were. When you and I started, and I came out of the music side, so freelancing wasn't a word, but it was what we all were. We were all independent, right. Whether I was a side musician, whether I was a studio engineer, whether I was working, production on a concert. You were hired for the gig, you were on the project until the project was over, and then you were gone. Every once in a while, you got lucky and you were in a studio and you just picked up project after project, which you thought you were staff, but you truly weren't. You just happened to be there.
Permalance. Do people still use the word permalance? Is that a thing anymore? I don't know.
I that was my MTV entree into the world. Was
Mhm.
permalance, because when I went in and
Yeah.
they called me in, and that's when we had to have a reel as as producers. We went in, we gave them our reel, and they looked at it and they said, "Okay, the position is permalance," and I was like, "That's cool.
Mhm.
What is that?" Well, it's not freelance, but it is. But you're going to be here all the time, but we're not going to give you benefits, and we're not going to give you
Right.
any, and you have no security, and 3 weeks out of the
We
year, we're
want
going
you
to
to
lay you
commit.
off.
Right. Right. We want you to commit to us for a long period, for an extended period of time. We're not going to commit to you for that period of time. That's what
Yeah,
permanence is. You know. So look, you have to take advantage of our leverage in that situation, which is that we can always walk away. And that's really the only leverage that any of us ever have, is saying no to a job. And so it's so important to diversify and to have lots of different work out there. I always say my job security comes from not being too screwed by losing any particular job. Barring a worldwide pandemic, our business keeps on going. So no matter what you do, and there have been times when I got kind of comfortable with a regular gig. We were talking about at MTV VH1. I had a show at VH1. We used to tape 3-4 days a week for years, like for 3 or 4 years. And when that one went away, there was a big gaping hole in my schedule from all the other work that I hadn't been doing in that time. And you got to be careful. You can't get too invested, because you're always, we're freelancers, and no matter what, we don't have contracts, we don't have long-term deals, we don't get severance. Good luck. Hope to call you again sometime, and that's what you get.
Yeah, that is. Those are great points that you just hit on, and they're really important for people to understand. Um, One of the things we did at Faro City, we just did a project for basically for parents whose kids are coming into the industry, and they want to be able to. They don't understand what we do. They don't understand our industry. Well, I don't understand. How do you not have a job? Well, why are you working for a year and not getting paid? Well, you mean did you get fired? No, no, no. The project was just over. It was only that. So what? There's no benefits? Wait, there's no security job. How do you get promotion? I mean, all the normal words don't apply to us.
Right.
And you have to adapt to a new mindset in order to kind of roll with this. I love it.
But the flip side of that, exactly, I love it too, because we are our own people. So it's true, we don't advance through the ranks the way that people typically do. But the way people typically advance through the ranks is basically beholden to somebody above them, to an employer, to work your way up and have to do it on their terms. And I love the fact that I got my own terms. And if you don't like my terms, goodbye, I'll work for somebody else. And it only works, I think, for us in our business because we have a hard job and it requires some expertise. And schmoozers can get by in lots of different businesses. And if you're a schmoozer, you're really only as good as the last person you schmoozed, right? But if you have a concrete skill, I know how to run this piece of equipment, and not a lot of people do. People always need that skill, and there's so much they could take advantage of, because they need you to do the job, and they know that if they don't pay you what you want, you're just going to go do that job somewhere else, and then they won't have anybody doing that job. It's supply and demand, and I feel like good, qualified, skilled operators are always in demand.
Absolutely. You keep giving me great segues. Thank you very much. This is totally not rehearsed, but it is it's the nature of the conversation. You talked about you have this skill on this machine, and this is what you do. Our industry is also notorious for changing tech. We evolve tech faster than anybody. And the operators have to make those moves.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you go back to school?
Yes.
You do?
Yes, frequently. Just within Chiron, for example, I started on the Infinite, which was not a computer. It's a TV typewriter. It's got 2 TV screens for its outputs, and a third black and white screen was its other output. There was no mouse. So when we switched to what we call the Duet, or the program's called Lyric, it was, even though the same company, a totally different way of approaching the job. It's the company, it was their own segue from one type of equipment to another. So they tried to make it similar enough to help operators like me learn the next thing. But still, it was a totally different skill set. And you go back for training. You go back for a 5-day class. I'm still, through the years, I would always, every time they come out with new versions of the software, I'd go back and take a class and learn how to do that. And then, of course, like I was saying earlier, we have the Chiron, we have the Expression, we have the Viz. And I would say it's kind of like learning English and then learning Spanish and learning French, and they all get you to the same place, and they're all kind of related, but they're different. Once you can speak French, I find Spanish is not that hard to then catch. Also, you kind of, after a while, when you're swapping back and forth between all this equipment, you kind of learn how to see past what button is there and try to see to where you got to get to, and then kind of get around to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally.
I've always taken online classes, and it's training. It's funny how training can change. It's different from one type of thing to another. I find that in entertainment, they're very big on having you come in for a couple of days and shadow people and get a couple of days of time on the equipment or whatever before they set you on your own. In sports, really, no, you show up the day of, and there's really not a lot of training days in sports. It's basically, you got 6 hours, have at it. And it helps, certainly with the different equipment, having this being a two-man job, as long as that constant is always a graphics producer sitting next to me telling me what to type. Then I just got to focus on which buttons do what, and no matter what I do, he's going to tell me what the score is and who's up to bat or whatever.
Right.
So you can only focus on the part you're doing, but I think
you also have a big interface, and this is something we should talk about, because people who've not been in a control room don't know the positions and don't really understand the signal flow of how this all works. Mm-hmm. You're beholden to a director. You have two masters. You have a producer who's actually, the graphics producer is talking to the show producer, who's, yes, we want this, don't do that, put this up. He's giving you that information. There's the flow there. Then you have a director who's actually watching the show and is calling the show, and he's calling for your graphics.
Right.
You have to be bipolar in listening.
So generally I keep the director in my headset, and I like to have the producer in a speaker somewhere that's not in my ear, because you can't have too many things going on in one ear at the same time. So I'm listening to the director and sort of peripherally listening to the producer, because I like to, you got to sort of stay ahead of the game and know where they're going, I'd say in the short term, I'm listening to the director for, he's cueing me on when to hit play, or he's cueing me on which, what side of the screen to put the side slab on, or whatever, just things that are more direct. Whereas the producer, I know he's saying, okay, next segment, we're going to be talking about these out-of-town scores. And I know in the back of my mind that out-of-town scores are going to come up. And then even before, you're always trying to anticipate what's going on around you. That's what makes you better at this job, is being able to give the people what they want before they ask you. And when you do this all the time, everybody has their role. And it's just a matter of knowing your role. And listening to the director, listening to the producer, that obviously helps you stay in the game and stay connected with what you're doing. And if you're totally disconnected, you can still get by. If I wasn't listening to any of these people and I was just listening to the person next to me, we'd be fine, but I'd be a little later with all my stuff, because you got to stay ahead of the game. It's not just, it's the pace. There's so many commercials, sports, for example. They keep making the commercial breaks shorter and jamming more things into them, so that, or I should say, making commercial breaks longer.
Yeah.
Come back from break, you might have 15 seconds to talk about something before the game starts again. So you've got very short periods of time. Same thing like in hockey. You get a whistle blow, you want to try to get something in, and you've got maybe 8 seconds to get it in before they blow the whistle again. And so if you haven't already listened to what's going to happen at the next whistle, by the time the whistle blows, it's too late to start thinking about it then. That makes sense.
Right. So many things there. So many things. I have to. One thing you just said, and I was realizing it's a skill. You said you don't want to have too many people in your ear. Yeah. In my position, I have way too many people in my ear. And I've gotten used to distinguishing because okay, I don't need to listen to that right now, but I do need to listen to this. When's it? And I just keep following,
Yeah.
and my eyes. I look around the room constantly to kind of be that. Camera guys call it selling a shot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they'll hunt.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, and you just described the exact same thing. You're kind of anticipating, hey, I got this. You want this? Hey, look at this. You know, and yes, it's good. No, it's not. Hey, save that. We'll use it later.
Right. Because exactly. Sometimes it's about knowing that the producer is going to want to talk about this soon. But sometimes you're watching the game and you're seeing stuff. We're looking at the stats. And, you know, honestly, most of what we look at, especially in a sport, in basketball especially, you're looking at to see where's the big difference between, okay, this team's got 15 rebounds and this team has 2. You try to find, okay, where is the interest? What tells the story? That's what we say all the time. What tells the story of the game through the statistics? Why is this team winning? This team's winning because the other team turned over the ball 7 times in the first half. Okay, well, let's show turnovers or 0 over 7, and then let's show points over turnovers or 14 over nothing. And we have to watch the game and keep an eye on what stats are going on. And when we see something that tells the story, we'll type it up and we'll put it up there. And then the producer, you know, the graphics producer, get the producers here and say, hey, check out font 1. I got this interesting thing. And they'll say, oh my God, look at that stat. And the producer will tell the director, okay, shoot that guy because we got a stat on him. And then he'll shoot that guy and I'll say font's good. And the director will say, put it in and run it. And I'll run it. And that's the workflow.
What's your sport? I mean, you do a lot of sports, obviously, and you've been doing it right out of school.
Yeah.
Are you a sports fan? Do you have an in-depth sports background?
There are people who are sports nuts who lived and breathed sports their entire lives, and that was never me. I've never been a big sports guy. I'm a Mets fan. I love going to Mets games. Since I was a little kid, we'd go to the games. I would occasionally put on the game, but it was always, the Mets were the only team I even sort of cared about. I never really watched a hockey or a basketball game. Occasionally I watched the Giants game. I was a casual sports fan, I would say. But I found that in graphics, I really enjoyed doing sports graphics. I did it in news for a little while. It was boring. I mean, it didn't have the same challenges. So I like sports from a technical, from my job standpoint. And I certainly don't hate sports. This would be a tough job to do if you hated it. And especially as I've gotten older, I've really grown to love baseball. And I often say you have to love baseball to work in baseball, because otherwise the games go on forever. And, you know, it takes a sort of, you better be passionate about it, because otherwise you're going to really hate working it by the end of the season. And it's a grind. Baseball is such a grind. There's so many games in a row, so many days in a row, that if you don't love doing it, you better find something else to do.
Yeah. As I say all the time, most of the people I've met in our industry are, and in I'm talking about all sectors. If you're not ADD, it's really hard to work in this industry.
Yeah, that's true.
Because things move fast, and you have to have that. And football's that. I mean, football is such a high speed game that you're paying, you know, things changing on a dime. Baseball, not so much. But
baseball, you can anticipate things a little better, you know? I mean,
yes.
Things develop a little more slowly. And so, you know, somebody gets on base and now the bases are loaded. Well, you know, before the at-bat starts, the bases are loaded. You know that he's faced this pitcher so many times before. You know that the team can't hit with runners in scoring position. You kind of, you do all these things before the play really starts to develop, so we can get those things ready. Sometimes it just means building it. Sometimes it just means the producer's looking up where we have things stored that we built earlier in the game. It's all about anticipating. It's all about having everything ready to go, so that when the moment happens, you've only got 4 choices to make, and it's just 1, 2, 3, or 4, and it's there. If you waited until that moment to decide what to do, it would be too late. We have 2 graphics channels on this machine usually, you know, generally font 1 and font 2. So if we're not sure what's going to happen next, we'll put 2 options on the 2 channels, and that way, okay, if it goes this way, he'll take font 1, and if it goes the other way, he'll take font 2. Do that kind of decision a lot.
Let's talk a little bit. We're running close to time here, but let's talk a little bit about future. And I'm going to hit 2 points. One, everybody says, oh, the stream. It's going to stream. And I'm like, stream is just another distribution for us.
Yeah.
But, so, I mean, how does the stream going to affect you?
Well, the thing is, when you're watching a game on your computer, there's no reason to say that you couldn't have all these other statistics and everything that we would ordinarily do as graphics kind of also on the screen at the same time. So I suppose as time goes on, you can start thinking in terms of what do we need to put in the big screen in the middle, as opposed to what's redundant because it's already being supported by all the stuff going all around the outside. But I can't say that in my day-to-day doing a game that ever really comes up. I mean, we still do a game. If a game is going to be on Amazon this week instead of on ABC, we don't know. I mean, whatever. I mean, it's the same thing. Even if like a regional baseball game, sometimes we're on the Mets, we're on SNY, sometimes we're on Channel 11. It's the same broadcast. We just changed the logo. So it's like you said, a stream is a stream or an output. It doesn't really seem to affect. Certainly for my job, how I go about my job. I don't really care where we're airing. I'm still gonna talk about the batter. It's still you're still covering an event or covering a sport. But I'm sure that's different based on your position and based on what type of things you're doing.
I know I'm going to distract you for a minute, but I was just sitting here thinking about like looking at how things change in the future. I was thinking a live event like a concert for not sports. Let's get to a concert.
Yeah.
And there's probably some really cool ways to incorporate what you do to a video board at a concert that would make it awesome. And I can't even think of what I'm thinking.
I know that
I don't know, fun facts, but that's a stupid one. But yeah.
AR is becoming a big thing, certainly, and it gets integrated with your graphics. The idea of it can't just have a full screen talking about somebody. It has to be in 3D, perched on top of a mountain with a drone flying around the graphic. And certainly, I can see in concerts and sports and concerts and entertainment venues, things like that, you get really creative with how you're gonna. I mean, how many graphics are there in a concert? I don't know. Maybe artists are going to start really taking advantage of putting their lyrics up there and having, sort of performing something more like a music video, more like, I'm showing my age again, but something more like, with the virtual display of it sort of integrated with what's going on the stage. And I think a lot of that with this augmented reality, you can really probably do a lot of really cool stuff with that. And I think you're going to see more of that.
Yeah. Where do you see your position, and how is that you see that evolving or changing over the next? I mean, 2020 killed us.
Yeah,
2020 changed the game completely, and we're not going back. So it was good. It was bad during the moment, but it was good because it accelerated a lot of change that was coming.
Yeah,
and I'll go back to my question. Where do you see what you're doing evolving?
So one of the big questions, one of the things we did during COVID was obviously the world went on remote, and we started doing lots of things from home. We did a whole season of the Mets where the road broadcasts we did from our home truck in Queens. So when the Mets went off to Miami to play the Marlins, we did the game from Queens. And, you see a lot of, they call Remy's or whatever. Now that COVID is ebbing, hopefully, and things are becoming back to normal, not everything is going back to normal. And one of the things you're seeing is that even as some of the other crew positions are going back on the road, graphics are staying home. And my position, look, I'm sitting in a computer. I can do that anywhere. I don't need to be on site to do that. And so one way I think that my business is changing is you're going to see a lot more of centralized graphics, and they're already doing it with the major sports networks and NBC and whatnot. They're getting pretty good at doing that kind of thing. And on one hand, it was out of necessity with COVID, but we all knew it wasn't just out of necessity with COVID. It's cheaper, and it's always going to go. I mean, where every business is going, it's going where it's cheaper. And if it's going to be, it's a luxury having a two-man team doing graphics, but what you've seen more and more through the years is that two-man team becomes a one-man team, and that your operator are being expected to know more about the sport and expected to show up in the truck and just do the game by themselves. For that matter, the Score Bug might be another graphics machine, but I've done plenty of these smaller games. It seems like the smaller the game, the harder you're going to work. And I've done plenty of small games where I'm doing the Score Bug on one channel of graphics and I'm doing the rest of the graphics on the other channel. And there's no producer. So now that's 3 jobs that have been merged into my own.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing where this business is really going, is just crews are getting smaller. You don't need a $20 million production truck and a crew of 50 people to do a game anymore. You can do it in a a tenth the price truck and, with 8 people running it.
Yeah.
Your production value suffers, but the people who make these decisions, they don't care as long as they're making the money. And that they
Yeah, and as long as it sells. I mean, we all say the same thing. We've lost a lot of quality and a lot of production when you lose the individuals who are experts. But the end game is that product's still selling. They don't care.
Yeah.
And it is, if that's acceptable now.
And they can trim it down all they want, but the positions still need to exist and people still have to do them. And the more you pare down how many people, then the more those people need to be even better at their jobs and are going to be in higher demand. So you're getting fewer jobs, but they're better jobs. They're, the rates have been good. They know that if they want somebody to do this mega 3-person job, that better be somebody who's good at it. And so they're going to pay what that person is worth because they got to secure them. So fewer jobs, but better jobs,
Yeah, it's the evolution of our industry. It just constantly keeps changing. And if you're coming in, Dave's take-home point is learn a lot.
Yes.
Learn to be diversified. Learn a lot of skills.
Yep.
Even if you don't use every single one of them, you need to know that because you can drop in at different points, and eventually they may become one.
And don't say no to things. Just, if you're given a task, just give it a try. Even if something you didn't think you were going to wind up doing. I didn't plan on working in graphics at all. I wanted to be a director when I was in college. And when I got to the Meadowlands, we did a little bit of everything. We'd run some replays. I'd run a little TDing. We'd run the scoreboards. And I just fell into graphics. Of all the different roles, that was the one that I found, hey, you know what? I like this. This is fun, and I'm good at it, so I'm going to keep doing it. And it just sort of worked out that's what I didn't know. And if I wasn't willing to do the other jobs, I probably wouldn't have found the graphics one. So try
great.
Everything.
And on that,
you'll see where it fits.
And on that very important note, I'm going to end. Thank you so much. This has been not only enlightening for our audience, it's been enlightening for me.
Good, yeah, great time. It's fun.
Okay, bud. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
God bless. Ciao.
Bye-bye.